Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Tim, DJ High Noon, your AKA your friendly neighborhood vinyl guy. So, hip hop. Rap is something you do, hip hop is something you live. KRS once said these words. It's very true. So, hip hop has been a huge part of my life. Ever since its inception, I've been there with an ear. So, there's been some discussion about it. Vinyl Guru, lovely. She had a wonderful homage to some of her favorites. And then there was a live stream a couple weeks ago with Brandon, Mr. Hall of Fame, and Billy Hurst, and Harmless Rebel Steve, and I think it was Mitch Wood. They got onto a very in-depth hip-hop conversation, which prompted Brandon, Mr. Hall of Fame, to even jump on even more and go into in-depth. And then Lovell Andrew, excuse me, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. That's what I do. He also had a wonderful video. So I'm gonna try to leave links to all them below. I pulled out a bunch of stuff that I have. You see stuff behind me. I don't know how long this is gonna go. If it looks like it's gonna go long, I'll break it up into 2 parts through editing. But I love hip hop. You guys who've watched my channel or talked to me know, I love hip hop. I was raised around hip hop. Yes, the big fat white kid loves hip hop. I was there 79 when its inception broke out in New York. So hip hop started in New York, everybody knows that. Kool Herc, 73, November, Radical DJ. Instead of playing the long songs, he played that break. But then he had a second copy and he backed it up and then played another break and another break and another break. And it was just a series of breaks. And hip hop was born. That's what it is. It's literally just going back to back on a break, letting yourself go crazy. Eventually they added lyrics and more sampling, and there it was. In its inception, it was raw, it was rebellious. I speak goodly. It was rebellious. It had one fist with a middle finger up because of the punk, not anti-punk, but it was kind of taking that same attitude. But it also had another hand in jazz, and it married its two in the streets. There's hip hop. Just that easy. What I wanted to talk about is some of the songs, some of the musicians that influenced me in hip hop, but also kind of a little bit of a history as we go, and then where we at. Because one of the things I noticed is that a lot of people talked about the 80s and 90s, but there wasn't as much talk about today. I understand it, but there's still it's great stuff out there if you're willing to dig for it. And we all dig. That's what we do. So when you talk about the start of hip hop breaking out in New York, you have to start here. Rapper's Delight, Sugar Hill Gang, Sugar Hill Records. The first taste we all got of hip hop. Little did we know, this was the first taste of hip hop that was pretty much bitten, which was an unwritten rule that you didn't do in hip hop. Sugar Hill Gang did not write this song. It was actually stolen from Grandmaster Caz. So, respect to Grandmaster Caz. But it was a smash. It took the world by storm. We didn't know what to do. And then one of the biggest songs that really influenced me, and yes, this is a hip hop record. Like I said, rap is something you do, hip hop is something you live. And one of the records that really influenced me and a lot of other people who either collected records or had that moniker DJ was Herbie Hancock. This is Rocket, which has the song Rocket on it. It's the lead off track. And when we heard this sound, this noise, this zigga zigga, it was so futuristic we didn't know what to do. And it was at that moment we realized that the turntable is now being used as an instrument. Not just because it was looping these beats live in real time, but we could also create some very interesting rhythms, some very interesting sounds just by manipulating the turntable. Yes, I said that correctly. The turntable was considered an instrument, and it still is. Ask any turntablist. We'll get into that. But very influential record. I mean, I played Rocket to death, and I was infatuated by that noise. It enthralled me. It encapsulated me. It drew me in. I wanted to know more, as a lot of other DJs and a lot of other fans of hip hop did. So hip hop, another start right here. the scratch introduced on vinyl. Well, Grand Wizard Theodore actually introduced it, but our first taste of the masses, Rocket. But also in the 80s, we had a lot of electro hip hop. I mean, I think this was talked about before, Soul Sonic Force. Sorry, I'm holding it upside down. Soul Sonic Force. This is Planet Rock. This is another just classic one that was in that electro days of hip hop. This is Hashim and Analfish. If you are familiar with any of the hip hop breaks, it's the one that starts "It's Time." It's a very electro dance hip hop song. But as people want to do, you know, everybody wants to explore their own identity, and we also got a taste early in the 80s, as hip hop was growing, of what really became a strong part of hip hop for such a long time, and that was considered knowledge-based hip hop. And we got a first big taste of that with one of the first true pioneers of MCing, Grandmaster Melle Mel, who was considered the lead rapper with the Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5 crew, and even to the point where, like with this one, it says Grandmaster and Melle Mel, essentially insinuating that Melle Mel was a guest in the Grandmaster Flash crew. They had their falling out, but White Lines, Don't Do It. They talked about, you know, poverty in the message. Obviously, White Lines, cocaine. But they actually had a purpose. So now we're moving past all of, I hate to say the mindless rhymes, but I mean, in here I've got, you know, tons of different examples. But early on, we had also this knowledge influence in hip hop that just was beyond just kind of saying, you know, I'm gonna walk you home and whatever the case may be. I mean, I could rhyme it, but it'd get dirty, and I'm a horrible rapper anyway. So let's continue. Obviously, you have to talk about the pioneers, Run DMC. This is the 12-inch for It's Like That. I mean, just a ton of stuff. Like I said, I didn't know if I want to show necessarily everything, but this one I do want to show just because of the historic factor, and it's not on in the right sleeve. That's okay. I would like to get the right sleeve for it. But this is T-La Rock and Jazzy J. It's a song called It's Yours. And if you notice, that little label right there is Def Jam. Def Jam was a huge part of the mid-'80s to, late aughts in hip-hop. Especially in the 80s and 90s, if you saw that label, you knew it was quality, you knew it was going to be something incredibly dope, and you probably just bought it off the label name, much like a lot of people did in the 60s with Motown. This is the very first record that ever came out on Def Jam. In fact, it's so first that the original pressings didn't even say Def Jam, it just said Party Time. After that, it said Def Jam. This was the very first record that Jazzy J, Rick Rubin did together out of that NYC dorm. This was it. And they actually sold copies out of Jazzy J's Caprice Classic. So, great history tied with this record and the label. So I was real stoked to find a copy of it. Like I said, I didn't care it wasn't in the right jacket, but I was super glad to get it. I'd love to have a first press, but this will do me good. I think I looked it up. It's like a second press or something like that. But glad to have this, and this, like I said, kicked off the huge label that was Def Jam, and one that you can kind of see over here, LL Cool J. That was their first big artist on Def Jam. That was the first one that kind of broke the label. Here's a 16-year-old kid. They're going through demos, and you know, Ad Rock and the Beasties were kind of hanging around then too, and that's how they got to know Rick Rubin. And Ad Rock actually heard this tape. It was in the stack of tapes. He's like, "Hey, this kid's pretty good. You may want to check him out, Rick." And that started it. But in case you didn't know, for those of you who maybe know a little bit of hip hop or are familiar with it, the song Radio, I Can't Live Without My Radio. LL actually says, cut creator, cut the beat with your hands. That's actually Jazzy J. So just a fun fact. Again, too much useless knowledge. You know, and it was the mid 80s that I guess it was like 86 that we started to see just hip hop. I mean, at that point, hip hop was just about fun. I mean, you had the Fat Boys. I mean, they never took themselves seriously, but it was the first, you know, just, I hate to say novelty hip hop group, but they were just a lot of fun. Heavy D and the Boys, this is a 12-inch for Mr. Big stuff. I mean, again, it was, Curtis Blow has the track If I Ruled the World. Amazing song. And Houdini, you know, but it was, I guess it was around 87 that things started to change. You know, you had, I think this was 87. Yeah, 87. I mean, it's LL's second album, Bigger and Deffer, another Stone Cold classic. It's okay, you guys can say, who in the hell are the Black Flames? Realistically, they were a one and done song. But again, it's that Def Jam label. But it's the B side of this. Another game changer. This was Public Enemy's Bring the Noise. It was the B side on the 12-inch. And little did we know that what they were going to become. So nobody bought this for the Black Flames. Well, maybe somebody did, but I wasn't one. It was all about Public Enemy's Bring the Noise. You know, and with Public Enemy, I mean, there's a lot of things you can say about Public Enemy as far as for being, you know, definitely taking that knowledge base of the Melly Mel influence and things like that to a whole new level. But they also introduced, you know, the idea of rock and hip hop being married. You know, we can get into that. You know, it's talked about on, I think Brandon, Mr. Hall of Fame, he was even talking about some of the samples, and he had mentioned that Slayer was sampled on a song for It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. But in that song, they literally mention Anthrax. Waxes for Anthrax, Still Looking to Rock Bells. And to even further that, here's another 87 release by UTFO where they do a song with Anthrax. So, I mean, you know, the notion that those worlds married really took off. I think Lovell mentioned Dana Dane. Wanted to show that one a little bit aware. But for me, what the thing with hip hop that grabbed my ear the most was lyricism. Well, 50-50, I'm going to be honest. Lyricism and beats. So you had, well, hold on. You had the Bomb Squad producing Public Enemy, Bring the Noise, which was just a wall of sound. And then you had people like Marlon Marl, who was a co-producer on this one, Eric B. and Rakim Paid in Full. But more than that, it was about the approach of the MC. Like I said, DJs kind of created this. They all started it. So with that, the beats were kind of the most important thing. And what we found is a lot of times in a lot of those records that I showed, the lyrics were fun, but they weren't super creative. They were fun to listen to, they were fun to dance to. But there was something more to be had. And Rakim's the first one, in my opinion. That's why I consider him the God MC, the Alpha and Omega. He is the top of the pyramid. If you want to fight me on that, I'd be willing to debate you, but you will lose. That being said, Rakim was the first one to really kind of drive and push the lyricism to the forefront. You know, he listened to the beat, he studied it, he understood what the words should do. And he started to craft his words around the music. If the music's going to do this, I should do that. And if the music's going to drop out, then this gives me a chance to really drive it home. But he also challenged it, not just the lyrics, but the listeners. He never dumbed down his lyrics, ever. But also, there was a very standard format. You know, when you got to the end of the bar, your lyric was done, and he broke that mold. You know, he would create multi-syllabic rhymes or rhymes in between the lines, or the bar would end and the lyric would wrap around. He was one of the first to do all of that. And it all changed. Lyricism took forefront. Beats were still important. You know, you talk about a masterpiece in beats, Paul's Boutique, but lyricism in the late 80s took off because of Rakim. You had people like Big Daddy Kane, KRS-One, these true lyricists. Another lyricist that, in my opinion, doesn't get mentioned nearly enough is Kool G Rap. Kool G Rap, to me, was the master of taking a word or a multi-word theme. Ot, you know, hot, bot, cot, whatever. You know, you probably can think of 15 but more of them better than I can. But he was a master of that and would take it on like a 4, 6, or 8 bar run and have it hit 3, 4 times in this line, 6 in that one, 3 or 4 in that one. And this is where we started getting a little grittier. You rewind back a few years, we actually were getting grittier with people like Schoolie D and Saturday Night, but this was now bringing, I hate to say crime, but it kind of was. It brought the grittiness of the streets forefront. It wasn't pretty, you know, all dance music anymore. It was thought provoking. It could be dangerous at times, but there was a lyricist's mentality approaching, and there was a lot bigger focus on lyricists, and one of them that was just lethal was Kool G Rap. Any of the Kool G Rap and Polo albums are a must. His first 2 solo albums, like 4, 5, and 6, I can't remember the other one, are also musts. Really, really, really need to take a look. If you're not familiar with them, Kool G Rap, DJ Polo, amazing lyrics. The other thing that I was really drawn to, at least towards the end of the 80s, like I said, was the beats. And when you talk about lyrics and beats, yeah, it's the reissue, but still, De La Soul, 3 Feet High and Rising, probably most considered I guess in my mind, the Sgt. Pepper's of hip hop, because what this album achieved with Paul's Boutique, you can't do anymore. Just impossible. What's sad is that this album pretty much cost the control of the De La Soul's catalog because of Tommy Boy. There's a whole big backstory with that where Tommy Boy didn't clear a sample. They said they weren't giving it. De La Soul says, yes, you have. Either way, there's a big lofty price tag that's looming over De La Soul's head, and it's impossible to get into control of their label now, which is sad. Regardless, the music is there. They have literally put it up for free at times. If you can get your hands on it, any of those first, 4 albums are just almost perfect from De La Soul. 3 Feet High and Rising, De La Soul is Dead, Blue in Mind State, and I can't remember the last one. It's gonna kill me. Oh well, we'll move on. We don't want Dead. But the other thing that was really impressive was, I'll pull this one out so I can kind of show it all. And even though the party, the hip hop, the not so aggressive hip hop still exists, and DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, what was unique about this album to me was that it was one of the few times where you didn't have just one DJ cut. It was like, okay, the DJ's got to do his little scratch routine. There were tons of that on this album because Jazzy Jeff was that good. And as someone who loved the minutia of the turntable and how they coaxed the sound out of it, that was an amazing feat that not just Jive, but everybody around him said, no, we just can't have one DJ cut. We have to feature him more. Sadly, that is something that doesn't happen as much, but DJs have their own albums. So do the math on that one. Not a huge lyricist, but beats, again, Steezo's Crazy Noise. This one was responsible for kind of breaking out and giving everybody the Skull Snaps hook from It's a New Day. People weren't really familiar with it, and it was used on the single on this one, It's My Turn. And a lot of people, it was just done so cleanly, they just got it from this because they couldn't find it. But a great example of what clever beats could do when the lyrics maybe weren't as prevalent, at least in the 80s. But then you had just crazy out there lyrics like Ultramagnetic MCs. I love this album. Kool Keith, he's called the Alien. He has such a great sense of musical wordplay and stuff like that just, it sounds so off the wall, but I love it. Still going to this day, and his album from 2019, Keith, was almost my hip-hop pick of the year. It was that good. So Ultramagnetic, this album definitely is worth it. But as we start to move out of the decade, things definitely changed. You were still seeing the party hip-hop, the dance hip-hop, but definitely there was a whole new era being ushered in. And I don't know if I could say this was specifically one group or another that was responsible for it, but at least one that was at the beginning of it all.